Welcome back, everyone. We got a good one coming your way here, live from Dallas, Texas, or North Dallas, that is. We got two people, though, on the show. Coach, of course, from Orange County, and our guest who needs no introduction, as always, a friend of the show, one of our favorites, the GOAT, I call him. Yes, that's right, Leigh Steinberg, super sports agent. How you doing, sir?
Just great.
Good to have you with us.
Let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
I've got to interrupt you. Leigh, the first thing I want to touch with is I have been so moved and I'm so grateful for the education that you are offering to young people. And I just wanted to congratulate you for going all out to help the business grow and to help young people. I do an adjunct professorship at Concordia University right down the road from you. And I just want you to know that giving back the way you are is so appreciated. And congratulations and thank you.
Oh, that's very nice of you. I'm committed to try and mentor a new generation of sports professionals that have ethics and principles and are specifically trained in the skill sets that you need, whether it's listening skills or negotiating skills or recruiting skills or charitable and community programs. And so let's bring this next generation along and have them be better and more impactful for sports than we've been.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, Adam. For
no doubt about it. I know. I love it. You know, it's interesting though. Golf has been a big part of my life since I was probably 7, and seeing the actual tours, the professional tours, go from where they were to where they are today is pretty remarkable. And unfortunately, maybe in the last few years, there's been a lot of tension and issues. Mainly, I mean, we've talked about what, Greg Norman and his partnerships, what they wanted to do, what they've done, and now what we've seen with so many of the big branded names that have moved off of the PGA Tour. They've settled for their money. They want to be paid. They got paid. Jon Rahm, Masters champion, got paid roughly $500 million by the Saudi group. So I want to get into this a little bit here. Here we are today. It's February 2024. PGA Tour announced that this was going to happen. So now you got the PGA Tour Enterprises getting about $3 billion from a group of investors comprised of a ton of ownership of sports teams around the country. So SSG is what they basically call the group. And $1.5 billion will go right to the PGA Tour Enterprises, which is interesting because that's going to help with the future of the tour. You're going to look at guys who roughly, let's say 200 players getting grants and, $900,000 here and there. It's nice. I love the idea that you've got players now retaining some sort of ownership. Before we get into the other, half of $3 billion and what that's going to go to, you've represented athletes, individual athletes, your entire career. How is this a benefit?
Well, I think I told you a year ago that this was a natural evolution that's come in many different sports where there was a ABA and an NBA, there was American Football League, and that eventually merged. And this is just a natural outgrowth of the popularity of golf and the desire of the golfers to be free agents as they are in other sports. And so June 6th of last year, we heard that the merger was imminent, but the reality is that both leagues are going to play in 2024. We don't know what the future will be, but this infusion of cash deals with the fact that the PGA was having financial problems last June, and all of a sudden you have this competitor with $720 billion coming along, and now the PGA did a good counter move because now it has the funds to go ahead and exist. So for right now, you have two different tours. I believe that it helps golfers. It gives them more obviously financial compensation, but it also helps golf fans because they have more golf to watch and more quality golf to watch. And so this is not a negative situation necessarily. And one would think that inevitably these two leagues probably work out their problems, and the LIV wants to keep with its team concept, and that's a sticking point between the two parties. And there are other sticking points, among other things, that the Saudis haven't really complied with U.S. law.
Right.
And so now you have congressional oversight talking about antitrust and the rest. So it's a good thing for golfers. It's a good thing for golf fans. And it's just a function of the fact that the economics of golf have never been rational, because the number of people who follow it may be pretty massive, but it's nothing compared, say, to the N.F.L. with 130 million people watching their Super Bowl, except that wealthy men love to play golf. And they love to have their companies involved with playing golf, and they love to have that tent on the golf.
Yeah. No, you're right.
So it's not completely rational.
Well, and part of this this deal with SSG has created, for the first time ever, a profit-making organization of the PGA Tour, but still keeping the 501(c) as a nonprofit. How do you see those two coexisting?
I ultimately think there'll be a merger, but for right now, I think they'll, the thought that it was totally inevitable, I still think it's inevitable that these two leagues go apart, because again, if you trace the history, there have been a large number of competitive leagues that happened, and but ultimately they merged, because what happens is the economics get so out of control from the standpoint of the tours that that they decide to stop competing,
right?
And they form a merger. That's not necessarily great for the individual golfers who right now are having their moment in the sun as they get fought over. And remember, golfers never thought there was going to be anything except the PGA.
Right.
So now that they've gotten a taste of freedom, this will go on a while, but eventually both parties running the tour will find it in their interest to create one consolidated system. And that'll happen. It's just the infusion of money from the strategic partners gives the PGA the staying power to continue functioning for a while. But inevitably, I think they merge.
Okay.
Let's hope you're right.
I actually think with all these negotiations and the PIF and how the Senate subcommittee, I mean the proceedings continuing to happen and the inquiries happening, I feel like they need to get it done. It's going to get done. I don't know why it takes this long, but I feel like this is so big. It's bigger than the players themselves. So it's like you look at the handful of names that the Saudis have brought over to the LIV Tour, and it's I realize it's not like a huge. It's just some people like Coach, who's a traditionalist. He loves the old school vibe of the PGA Tour. We lost John Rahm, we lost Dustin Johnson or whoever it might be. But these names really pack a punch. So go ahead.
Inevitably, there will be more and more signings.
Okay, I think so.
Okay, inevitably, and that's what keys the desire to merge.
Okay.
Because as the PGA starts to feel pressure because it loses more and more names. Yeah. Remember, you're dealing with a group that has $720 billion.
Yeah.
So they can continue to explode the compensation and pick off the top golfers. So what happened, if you take the USFL in football, when the USFL had a year in 1984 where it signed Reggie White and Steve Young and Jim Kelly and name after name, they picked the draft clean, and that provided the impetus where owners on both sides said, "Wait a minute, we have an interest in the tour, not the individual golfer making mega dollars," and that'll push it together. So John Rahm's not the last name you'll see. They'll continue picking off strategic people until the pressure grows on the PGA to make the deal.
Well, before we get into one of our favorite conversations that has to do with football, I want to ask you one more question about this, and maybe Coach will have a follow-up. But, one of the things that I think kind of struck a nerve for me, Lee, is that some of the players, since I'm in Texas, might as well just name them, Jordan Spieth and Scotty Scheffler, both who are on the board, want these, players to be penalized. Okay, so any player that went on live, come back, they got to be penalized. Rory McIlroy, one of the biggest names in golf, thinks that they shouldn't be punished. Just, we're all about trying to bring everyone together, right? What is your opinion? Are these guys who are making a ton of money, they're going to want to pay a penalty and still come back on the PGA Tour?
Well, no, and inevitably they won't pay a penalty because anytime you have a conflict like this, you've got intense interests and you've got people that feel like they've been loyal to the PGA and that you shouldn't reward the people that broke ranks. But let's be clear about this. The PGA was not handed down to Moses by God on Mount Sinai, okay?
Yeah.
It's a league, and they've had all the power, and inevitably something like this was going to happen. And in other words, golfers had their problems with the PGA in terms of its power and restrictiveness and the lack of rights. So the PGA has themselves to blame a little bit for the emergence because they could have made the conditions better if they could do this $3 billion deal. Now they could have done it, a year ago,
right.
and never had anybody leave. So it takes a certain willingness to compromise and to just look at one's own interests. And inevitably that will happen. And all the anger and everything, the same thing happened with every competitive league. The people that left were traitors and all the rest of it. But inevitably in the solution of this, that will all go away.
Well, and that'll also allow the development of the young player, and the PGA will actually have the money to put into the Korn Ferry Tour, etc. Out at the Genesis, I got a chance to speak with Ludwig Aberg, a good old Texas Tech Red Raider. And oh, by the way, he said to send Patrick a guns up. So it was great to see. And Ludwig did finish his credits, by the way. But to develop those young guys, but keep your stars happy, as you said, it's been a very difficult balance. But that goes back to when Greg Norman had this idea back in the 90s.
So you seed the sport and you grow for the future by the best developmental system you can have for young people coming along. And this money that the PGA is getting can also be used for developmental purposes of young golfers.